The email hit my inbox at 8:07 a.m., subject line, Urgent CEO Sun Welcome Event Budget. The kind of corporate nonsense that practically smells like Axe body spray and cheap champagne. I clicked, already bracing for the latest stunt. HR wanted me to approve a $50,000 budget for a party. Not for clients, not for press, not even for internal morale. No, this was for Chad, the CEO's spawn. Hadn't worked a day in his life unless you count networking on Daddy's yacht. $50,000. Meanwhile, just last Thursday, I was told the emergency stairwell inspections could wait until next quarter because we're tightening spending. I'd requested $2,400 for a third-party audit after our back generator failed a surprise drill. Denied. Too expensive. And now HR, people who once made me submit an itemized breakdown for $17 worth of emergency lighting, had the gall to ask me to rubber stamp a frat boy rave. I stared at the screen for a full minute, then typed, approved, $1. Let me know if you need more context. I even added a smiley face. Passive-aggressive? Absolutely. But after 12 years of patching duct-taped compliance reports and quietly saving the company from fire code violations that could have bankrupted us, I figured I'd earned a little sass. Oh, and before we keep going, if you've ever worked in an office where team building means a keg and a PowerPoint, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe. Trust me, we've got plenty more where this came from. It genuinely helps the crew behind these stories keep doing what we do. All right, back to the bloodbath. I figured HR would reply with some canned thanks. We'll follow up, but nope. 5 minutes later, I got an all-caps Teams ping from Lauren in HR. Is this a joke? I didn't answer. Not because I was being petty, okay, maybe 30% petty, but because my calendar was already triple booked with real problems. Main elevator had been ghosting floor 7 again. Our backup server room was running hot, and the main entrance maglock was showing a latency glitch during badge swipes. All stuff that could cause an actual lawsuit, not a hangover. By lunch, the email chain had ballooned to include the CFO, the events liaison, some ex-influencer the Sun hired last week, and finally, the CEO himself. His contribution, single sentence that reeked of spreadsheet smugness. Mary, we need you to support this as a gesture of alignment with the executive vision. I read that line 3 times. Alignment with the executive vision. Sir, your vision involves LED strobe lights and a branded ice sculpture that pees champagne. Still, I wasn't reckless. Before replying, I pulled up our org chart, opened the facilities compliance binder. Yes, I still keep a hard copy. Did a little side checking. Because if they were planning to throw money around like this, someone had to make sure the actual building didn't set itself on fire while Chad was doing tequila body shots off the boardroom table. Later that afternoon, I sent my reply. I remain concerned that this allocation exceeds discretionary thresholds and may pose risk during upcoming OHS audits. Approved. $1 remains in effect unless reclassified by ops. This time, no smiley face. And here's the thing, they didn't even read it. They assumed I was bluffing, that I'd get steamrolled like always, that I'd sit back, sip my sad desk salad, and let the kids run the asylum. But here's what they forgot. I didn't just manage the building. I built the protocols they ignored. I designed the emergency logic trees they slept on. And more importantly, I still had keys to every door they thought they'd locked behind me. It was scheduled like a routine catch-up. Subject line: Q2 budget alignment and culture fit discussion. But let's not kid ourselves. You don't bring the CEO into a midweek HR sync unless someone's about to get professionally neutered. The meeting was in conference room B, one with the broken speaker mic and the giant canvas print of a mountain summit that's supposed to inspire leadership, but mostly just looks like an inspirational poster got drunk at a Staples. I walked in with a legal pad, a working pen, and a pulse full of caffeine and contempt. Lauren from HR opened with a smile that could peel paint. We just want to understand the thought process behind your budget decision, Mary. My response is $1 more than the safety audit got. So in a way, Chad's already ahead. That didn't land well. Then in slithered the CEO, Jared, a man whose entire personality seemed to be a startup glossary in human form. He wore those sneakers that cost more than my car's transmission, and that smug, glassy expression of someone who thinks emotional intelligence is a Slack plugin. He didn't sit. He leaned. On the table. Like a tech stool was gonna pop out of the carpet. Mary, he said, in the tone someone might use to explain Bitcoin to a dog, We're trying to build something bigger than just buildings and badges. You've always been reliable, but lately, there's a bit of resistance. I waited. You've been in the same role a long time, he added. And sometimes legacy systems people have a hard time seeing where we're headed. Ah, there it was. The slow shove toward the exit disguised as a compliment. Legacy, euphemism for we'd fire you, but you'd probably sue. I glanced at Lauren. She was nodding like she'd rehearsed this in a mirror. What we're asking, she said, is for a little more flexibility. A little less stonewalling of team spirit. Stonewalling team spirit. I made a mental note to print that on a coffee mug. Jared continued, if this party makes Chad feel welcome and helps him connect with the team, then it's a win, right? Just need you to be a team player here. He smiled. The kind of smile that says, I know where the bodies are buried and which closet still has asbestos. Of course, I said, you're right. It's not worth creating tension over a single line item. I'll revisit the approval. Jared relaxed. He thought that was the end of it. That afternoon, I logged into the facility's dashboard. My access was already downgraded quietly. No email, no notice. Just the soft lockout that says, you've been put in the backseat. You stopped touching the steering wheel. Thing is, I expected that. I even screen recorded my last login the day before, just in case. What they didn't touch were the other systems, because they didn't know which ones mattered. The Emergency Asset Index, the compliance contacts for first responder protocols, the named officer listing with the State Facility Oversight Portal. They thought those were just clerical, legacy files, paper pusher stuff. But those files, those were the crown jewels, and every single one of them still had my name, my credentials, and my contact as the first line of emergency escalation. I walked to the main server room, swiped my badge. It still lit green. Then I ran a trace on access controls, who had updated what and when. I saw Chad's events planner had set up a new VIP room layout with a blocked egress path. I sent the required fire code waiver request to legal, knowing full well they'd ignore it. Back in my office, I pulled out the hard copy of the emergency lockdown protocol, highlighted the section on override authority. My initials were still there. No one had changed a thing. So I put the binder back, calmly closed my laptop, and took a long sip from my travel mug. They wanted a team player. Sure, I'd play. But they forgot I wrote the damn playbook. They called it a strategic pivot, which, in corporate speak, means you're being shoved out of the lane you built with your own hands, and offered a folding chair in the hallway as a consolation prize. My new title? Internal Liaison, System Synergy. Might as well have slapped miscellaneous broom closet ghost on my nameplate and been done with it. They moved me to a cube 3 rows past the copier, right beside the janitorial supply closet. My inbox was emptied. My calendar, once a minefield of compliance checks, contractor briefings, and audit preps, now contained exactly one recurring event: touch base with team culture champions. Spoiler, that meeting never actually happened. On day one of my new liaison role, I walked past the glass-walled corner office that used to be reserved for our legal counsel during audits. It now belonged to Chad. He was in there with his feet on the desk, watching YouTube videos on a company monitor. Googling, can crypto mining damage office Wi-Fi? I wish I were joking. By his second day, IT had flagged his login for installing unapproved blockchain software on our main server. When asked about it, he grinned and said, I'm optimizing unused bandwidth. His father laughed. That's initiative, son. Meanwhile, the printer in legal was still broken, and our HVAC panel was stuck in diagnostic mode for 2 weeks. I sat at my new desk and opened the one portal they hadn't revoked, the back-end security dashboard. It was legacy code, built by a contractor I personally hired back in 2016. No one else even remembered it existed. The new ops head had replaced our access badge vendor, but never bothered to sync the state compliance contacts or emergency escalation tree. So, I did what any good liaison would do, quietly restructured the digital chain of command. First, I rerouted emergency SMS alerts. If a fire alarm triggered, they'd still get notified, but the direct call would hit my phone first. I updated the named officer listing with the State Facilities Compliance Board. Jared's name had been pending for weeks, just waiting on paperwork he never filed. So I removed him entirely and recertified mine. I updated the private internal lockdown codes. System required a named officer token to confirm changes. Lucky me, I was still one. I wasn't hiding, I was documenting. The funny thing about compliance systems is they're not flashy. They don't show up on org charts or get welcome Chad balloons. but they're legally binding, and when you ignore them long enough, they become landmines. I wasn't setting traps. I was just letting the map speak for itself. 3 days into my shadow role, I noticed Chad's event planner, some trust fund Barbie with a clipboard, put in a work order to block off the main lobby for the Legacy Bash. That included taping over fire exits for ambience and rerouting traffic through the kitchen hallway. She sent me the request to rubber stamp. I replied, request forwarded to State Fire Marshal per code 9.3c. Please allow 10 business days. She didn't reply. Instead, she had Jared call me. Mary, he said, voice dripping with thinly veiled disdain, let's not get bogged down in bureaucracy. These are soft policies. We don't need to loop in the state for everything. I paused, then said, you're absolutely right. I'll mark the file accordingly. What I didn't say was, I'd marked it non-compliant, pending legal risk assessment, which gets auto-synced to our insurer's audit folder. Later that night, I got a ping from the facility's contractor, we still used for after-hours maintenance. Texted, heads up, your name's still showing as primary contact. Want me to change that? I told him no. Not yet, because they could shove me into a corner, strip my title, erase my calendar. But what they couldn't do was rewrite who still held the master keys. The email from legal landed at 4:42 p.m. on a Friday, prime time for corporate sleight of hand. Subject, offboarding confirmation, final compliance checklist. No greeting, no context. Just a bland PDF attachment and a request to sign and return by end of day. Classic move. They wanted to close the books before the weekend. Clean hands, clean conscience, no paper trail come Monday. I opened the file. It was a checklist about 4 pages long. A bureaucratic autopsy of everything I'd once overseen: facility vendor credentials, access badge systems, emergency response logs, audit prep responsibilities. Line by line, asked me to confirm each has been transferred to new authority. At the bottom was a signature box, with the word final stamped in gray watermark font behind it, like a gravestone for relevance. They were hoping I'd go on autopilot. Click, click, sign. But here's the thing, autopilot doesn't catch fire code violations. Autopilot doesn't know that our primary generator's exhaust diverter was rerouted with an expired spec. Autopilot doesn't stay up until 2 a.m. rewriting lockdown protocols because the new CEO wanted mood lighting wired into the breaker box. So I grabbed a red pen. First thing I checked, who they claimed was now the facility officer of record. According to the form, it was Tyler, the new head of ops. 32 years old, came from a SAW company that had no physical office. His entire idea of infrastructure was a WeWork keycard and a Slack channel. I flipped to the end of the checklist, where it asked me to initial that state-designated facility officer has been notified and transition completed. I logged into the compliance portal. His name wasn't there. In fact, nothing had changed. My digital signature still sat on the line filed 3 years ago, right after we updated the gas leak procedures. Still marked active. Still listing my phone number for emergency alerts. I stared at it for a long minute and opened the timestamp log. No one had even attempted a change. Not Tyler, not legal, not Jared. The building, the damn law, still considered me the named officer. Which meant if something went wrong, I wasn't just involved, I was accountable. So I made a decision. I signed the checklist, but only the parts that were technically true. I checked the box that said budgetary permissions transitioned, because they were. They locked me out of dashboards weeks ago. Initialed badge system access revoked. Yup, sure was. But when I got to the emergency response role transferred, I wrote in the margin, see state compliance record update pending by ops. They'd never read it. Not really. They'd file it, pat themselves on the back, and assume I was fully out of the system, which was fine by me. Because while they were planning which caterer to book for Chad's Legacy Bash, I was rereading the clause in our building lease that required an active facility officer be physically available during any high-capacity event. Spoiler, Tyler hadn't reserved anyone, not a contractor, not even a janitor. He assumed, like all of them, that things just worked. They forgot the quiet part of this job is also the deadly part. Fire code isn't a vibe. Gas leaks don't care about morale. If that building so much as triggered a false alarm with no certified officer on site, they'd have to answer to more than investors. They'd be explaining themselves to the fire marshal. So I signed, dated, and scanned the form. Hit reply all, added no commentary. And then I went home, poured myself 2 fingers of bourbon, and watched the building's audit alert dashboard flicker to life on my tablet. Still synced, still active, and still mine. Lobby smelled like burnt citrus and ambition. Uplighting washed the walls in gold, and a rented string quartet played what I can only describe as the Spotify Wealth Vibes playlist. They'd cleared out the security desk and replaced it with a custom ice sculpture of the company logo, which, thanks to the aggressive AC, was already crying onto the welcome banner like a disappointed parent. It was Chad's big night. The Legacy of Leadership Gala, they called it, because apparently Daddy Gave Me a Job didn't have the same ring. The whole building had been hijacked by florists, party planners, and at least one guy in a velvet vest carrying trays of sustainable oysters. I'd been watching it unfold from home via the internal cam feeds no one remembered to disconnect me from. The CEO, Jared, was on stage, technically the reception platform in the atrium, but let's not split hairs, was holding a champagne flute like he'd practiced in the mirror. "We're not just celebrating a new chapter tonight," he said, pausing for effect. "We're honoring legacy, and the next generation who will carry that forward." A smattering of polite investor claps. Chad raised his glass and winked at a woman I'm 90% sure was the event's coordinator. The band shifted into some orchestral cover of a Drake song. I almost choked on my microwave taquitos. That's when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Ray, the night shift building contractor I'd worked with for years. One of the few people left who still remembered I knew what I was doing. "Backup door override just tripped again. Third time today. Want me to reset or flag it? That door had been patched last quarter after a delivery truck scraped the reader offline." I'd filed a full report, marked it sensitive because of its tie-in with the main lockdown circuit. Ray had fixed it. Since then, Chad's team had reprogrammed access routes to use it for their VIP lounge entrance, because apparently nothing says visionary like disabling a fire egress to make room for a mimosa bar. I stared at the message and smiled, because that door, tiny, boring, unnoticed, was tied directly to the emergency protocol tree. When it glitched, the system entered a passive alert state. 3 strikes, it would trigger the override matrix, which no one in that party planning circus had bothered to update. Dry amusement rolled through me like thunder. My name was still on the override as primary officer. I tapped a reply. "Flag it. No reset yet. Let me know if it trips again." Outside the atrium windows, luxury sedans pulled up one after another. Investors arrived with spouses, assistants, the faint look of people who'd rather be watching a playoff game than endure artisanal canapés and Jared's speech about ecosystem evolution. I scanned the security feed. One of the hallway cameras cut out, normal during peak Wi-Fi loads when someone streams 4K. Then came another flicker, this time from the stairwell cam. Probably just a router load hiccup, or the crypto rig Chad thought was discreetly tucked in the broom closet overheating again. Either way, building was groaning, quietly, under the weight of neglect and narcissism, and no one there noticed. They were too busy getting their name tags printed in gold script and Instagramming themselves beside the champagne waterfall. I watched Chad pose with his hand on Jared's shoulder like he was conquering Everest. Jared leaned in, whispered something. Chad laughed and lifted his glass to the camera. Legacy. They had no idea. I leaned back on my couch, opened the admin portal, waited. The building was telling me a story, and I was listening. 9:16 p.m. The moment the override tripped, it started with a soft click, so quiet no one noticed. Not at first. The main lobby doors, those big tempered glass monoliths imported from Germany, shifted half an inch, then sealed. The magnetic lock engaged with a soft thunk, barely audible over the clinking of glasses and forced laughter. Inside, we're handing out tiny gold foil boxes of truffles with the company logo embossed on the lid. A string quartet had just transitioned into a dramatic rendition of Don't Stop Believin', which felt both ironic and completely tone-deaf given what was about to happen. On the second floor, someone swiped their badge to re-enter the stairwell and got the dreaded red light. No beep, no access. They frowned, tried again. Nothing. Then came the kitchen hallway. Waiter with a tray full of crab cakes nudged the exit with his hip. Didn't budge. He pushed again, harder. The panel blinked yellow and locked. And in the server room, buried behind the HR office, a low alert started pulsing, one the new head of ops had never seen before. Because the ops team, in their wisdom, had never read the legacy override procedures. Back at home, I watched the admin dashboard as the system went dark in chunks. Stairwell 2A, locked. In lobby access, locked. Executive Hall East, locked. Each one confirmed by the lockdown matrix I'd helped right after the 2019 gas leak scare, when legal realized we didn't have a unified emergency seal protocol. They let me design one. Just make it invisible, they said, so it doesn't scare guests. Invisible? Sure, until it wasn't. I sipped my tea, entered my override credentials. Execute lockdown, confirm. Firm officer status. Mary W. active, proceed with building containment. Why? And just like that, the building folded into itself. Every badge scanner froze. Every door without mechanical override shut down. Elevators went into hold mode. External security feed disconnected as designed. Emergency contacts triggered. But because I had flagged the event as a level 3 internal containment alert, they'd funnel through the named officer chain. Aka, me. Inside, took another 90 seconds for the ripple to hit the surface. It started with a junior associate trying to exit for a smoke break. He waved to security. There was no security. The guard had left for a bathroom break and couldn't get back in either. Then came the sound of someone banging on the glass, lightly at first, like a kid testing the surface of a lake. Then more urgent. A loud, "Hey, door's not working." From the atrium, I watched as guests began pulling out their phones. Reception bar was fine, but the building's internal Wi-Fi, saturated with AV traffic, was sluggish. A few people laughed. Probably a glitch, someone said. Another joked, guess we're trapped until we finish the champagne. That joke didn't age well. Chad swaggered up to the reader near the East Wing exit. Swiped. Red. Swiped again. Red. He hit the panel with the side of his hand. What the hell? From across the atrium, the events coordinator raised her hands. This part of the program? It was not. In the control room, unmanned of course, a red strobe began to flash. No sirens per code, just the silent kind that means someone somewhere has just made a very expensive mistake. Back at my house, my phone lit up. Ray again. Just saw override flash active. You in the system? I typed, everything's fine. Let it run. Then I pulled up the building's emergency log. Facility officer contacted. Yes, responder alerted. Pending. Cause, unacknowledged access override, authority verification. Confirmed Mary W. Everything was humming exactly as designed. They thought I was gone, but they never checked who still held the title when the building decided it didn't want to play nice. And now, the building wasn't asking for permission. It was asking me. 9:24 p.m. The atrium's champagne tower had begun to sweat. HR's Lauren was the first to crack. Been half a flute deep into Rosé Prosecco when her phone buzzed. 3 missed calls from the building's main line. She stepped aside, heels clicking against imported tile, and hissed into the receiver, "What do you mean we can't override it?" "Just call IT." Problem was, IT was at home. Because HR decided they didn't need non-essential staff for the party. And because the new ops team assumed anything technical could be handled by a Slack bot and a good attitude. Downstairs, the event planner was red in the face and waving her iPad around like a magic wand. It says access denied. But we're staff. I uploaded our badges yesterday. The new head of ops, Tyler, the same man who'd once asked me if sprinkler systems had firmware, was frantically typing on a company laptop at the media booth. Every few seconds, he'd look up and mutter, "Just give it a second." As if patience could brute force credentials he never properly inherited. He'd entered the admin dashboard 3 times, only to be met with a screen that read, "Insufficient clearance named officer authentication required." He tried calling Jared. Meanwhile, Chad, our champagne-scented prodigal Failson, was leaning against the donor plaque wall with a glass of something brown and way too full, slurring, "Y'all are freaking out for no reason. Dad'll fix it. He owns the building." He did not. Technically, building was leased under a sub-entity with a shared insurance rider, meaning any compliance breach during high-occupancy events triggered clauses that even Jared didn't fully understand. But I did. I'd written the addendum myself after we updated the hazard certification back in 2021. And speaking of Jared, he was nowhere to be found. Until a ripple of silence passed through the room like an air conditioning unit sucking all the sound out. The source, senior investor standing near the north exit, staring at the wall-mounted security panel. It was flashing red, not pulsing, not blinking gently, full red. System status, lockdown access, overridden named officer, authenticated. He raised a single hand slowly. "Excuse me," he called out, his voice calm and surgical. "Who's your designated named officer for this facility?" You'd have thought he'd asked where the nuclear codes were kept. Chad blinked. "Is that like fire guy?" Lauren turned pale. It's ops, or maybe Jared. We transitioned roles recently." The investor's gaze didn't waver. "So who's legally responsible for that panel flashing red right now?" Tyler finally looked up from the laptop, cheeks flushed, sweat beading on his forehead. "We're working on it. Everything's under control." But it wasn't. Because I was watching from home, and the system had just triggered a flag I built in for unsanctioned override attempts, kind that doesn't just lock the doors, but notifies the fire marshal. And in the silence that followed, someone whispered just loud enough for it to carry. "Wasn't that Mary?" The name landed like a dropped wrench in an empty hall. People looked around. Lauren's jaw clenched, Tyler froze. And somewhere in that building, a soft chime echoed, the backup power relay switching to internal override mode. I didn't blink, didn't smile. I simply opened the emergency responder log. Contacted, Fire Marshal, District 7 ETA, 7 minutes officer of record, Mary W. Status. Active, let them scramble, let them guess. Because they'd spent weeks pretending I didn't exist. But the building remembered. The lead investor didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He just walked, slow, deliberate steps across the gleaming floor of the atrium, past the confused guests, the limp canapes, flickering LED uplights, until he was standing eye level with Jared, who just returned from some back hallway huddle, his phone still buzzing in his hand. The investor tapped the flashing red panel on the wall with a single finger. "Who," he said, his voice cutting through the ambient panic like a scalpel, "is your designated named officer for emergency facilities compliance?" It wasn't a question. It was a lit match. Jared blinked. His mouth opened slightly. He expected a teleprompter to appear beside the dessert table. His gaze darted to Tyler, then to Lauren, then to the ceiling, anywhere but at the panel, which now displayed a full system alert. Override, executed status, locked, authorization, named Officer M. Wendell. HR's Lauren stepped forward, attempting her usual brand of corporate CPR. "We've had some recent staffing transitions, so the system probably hasn't been updated yet. It's more of a clerical," the investor didn't move. "So who is it?" Tyler coughed. "We submitted the paperwork to reassign it last quarter," the investor cut him off. "Submitted or finalized?" Tyler froze because he knew. The form was sitting in his drafts folder, probably nestled between a pizza coupon and an unread Slack thread titled Urgent Fire Code Routing. And that's when it happened. A single voice, small but clear, from the back of the room. A junior analyst, maybe 2 months into the job, still clutching her tiny purse like it was going to protect her from legal liability. "Wasn't that Mary?" Her voice cracked on the name, but she said it, said the thing no one else would. And just like that, silence spread. Real silence. The kind that swells in your ears and makes time thick. Forks paused midair. A guy from marketing coughed and looked at his shoes. The string quartet trailed off mid-measure, realizing this wasn't a scheduled intermission. Mary. The name they had quietly erased from calendar invites, from org charts, from Slack channels. The woman they pushed into a support role like they were slipping a body into a grave. But she wasn't gone, because now every screen said her name. Every panel blinked her authority, and every door refusing to open was her design whispering, "You should have thought twice." HR turned to Jared, her face pale. "You want to call her?" He didn't answer, just looked around like the walls might open up and swallow him. And somewhere outside, the distant sound of sirens began to echo down the avenue. I sat on my couch, watching it unfold on the feed. Calm, no grin, no smug satisfaction. Just that cold, even quiet of long-awaited confirmation. They could laugh at my job title, but they couldn't laugh at the law. And now, the law was en route with clipboards, 9:32 p.m. The fire marshal stepped through the sealed front doors like Moses parting the Red Sea, except this sea was $50,000 of wilted hors d'oeuvres and rising investor blood pressure. He was flanked by 2 deputies and a clipboard, and wore the unimpressed expression of a man called out of bed for something that sounded, in his words, like a rich kid's science fair gone wrong. He barely glanced at Jared before speaking. He was the named officer of record for this facility. Jared launched into a slurry of polished nonsense. "We've been undergoing a transition of responsibilities. The compliance framework is evolving, and the systems may not yet reflect." The marshal raised one hand. "Let me rephrase. Legally, right now. Whose name is in the state facility records for emergency authority?" Silence. He repeated, slower this time. "Who is your named officer?" No one answered. Then, across the lobby, the security panel beeped twice, an authorization signal, and the door next to the reception desk clicked open. And I walked in. No fanfare, no slow-motion entrance. Just me, Mary Wendell, clipboard in hand, badge still clipped to my belt, and the override key fob they never bothered to retrieve. I made it 3 steps before the marshal turned to me. "You," I nodded once. That would be me. He pulled out his log sheet, cross-referenced the record. Without a word, handed me the authorization code to resolve the lockdown. I walked past the events table where Chad was now slumped on a stool, slurring something about legacy equity. His phone was dead, his access credentials even deader. I reached the panel, swiped in, and typed the 12-digit sequence I'd built into the system 3 years ago. Override disengaged, door system, reset access routes, normalized, the building sighed. Not literally. You could feel it, a long exhale of released pressure. A faint click-click-click rippled through the floors as locks retracted, lights stabilized, systems rebooted. And then I turned. The lead investor, face granite serious, stepped forward. His voice wasn't loud, but the entire atrium leaned in to hear it. "We're pulling our funding," he said, "unless she is on the board of the new venture." Jared opened his mouth, closed it, just looked down at the floor like it might open up and swallow him whole. I didn't gloat, didn't smirk, just looked him dead in the eye. "Next time you cut someone," I said, my voice even and sharp, "make sure they don't still hold the key to the front door." I handed the marshal the printout from the system, complete with my signature and the system logs. He took it without a word, then turned to Jared. "We'll be filing a report. You'll want legal present." Behind me, Chad groaned. He was trying to log into the control panel with his phone, which now only displayed a cheerful message. "Access denied, session expired." He threw it down. I turned back to the panel, toggled the final command, and shut the lockdown system off for good. Then I walked out, past the guests, past the security team, who now realized whose orders mattered, past Lauren, who stared at her shoes like they were about to explain the concept of humiliation to her. I didn't take anything with me, didn't need to, because for 12 years I'd been invisible, the woman behind the badge, the Just Mary they only noticed when the lights flickered or the floor creaked. But tonight, I walked out of that building as the only one in control, and I never looked back. You're the real stars of the corporate jungle. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe, or I'll flick the switch on your old cubicle memories.